Good afternoon. Welcome to our Green Recovery Scheme webinar, being hosted by Paul Birch, our Regulation and Communication Director. I will now hand you over to Paul to start the presentation. Thank you.
To take you through this Green Recovery Scheme, which is an exciting development for us. From the agenda, you can see we're going to do a quick introduction to the scheme and the call for evidence, and then straight away get into questions and answers. We have a long list of projects already. We'll take you through those and do a little bit of polling, and then there'll be time for more questions and answers after that as well. So hopefully this will be a relatively interactive session. I have prepared quite a large bank of slides. That is so that we can publish these on our website after the session, and they can be read in a standalone fashion. So I will move over some of the material in the presentation very quickly, but it will be available for you to review at your leisure later on, and that will enable us to focus as much time as possible on question and answer sessions. So just a quick introduction to the scheme, if we could have the next slide, please. I think the case for action is very clear. It's the combination of a climate emergency leading to the government's 10-point plan and energy white paper, combined with an economic emergency that's the result of COVID lockdowns. So if we move on to the next slide, Ofgem have challenged all the energy network companies about what we can do to not only build back and build up our economy, but build back in a green manner, and hence the Green Recovery Scheme. So if we keep moving at pace, the phase one of the Green Recovery Scheme is already happened and is underway, and in that we accelerated a number of projects that were already planned to make sure that they were helping to stimulate the economy. In Electricity North West, we kept working all the way through all of the lockdowns. Our work has never stopped, but there were a number of projects that we were able to accelerate to focus on their economic recovery benefits. Some examples of those are on the next slide. If we move on, key ones I pick out there. We've moved quickly on the enterprise zone in Salmesbury, which will support low carbon technologies. We've done a lot of work on the South Manchester enterprise zone, which again not only is seeking to enable economic growth, but also the development of a lot of low carbon infrastructure, particularly electric vehicle charging. And we are rolling out an initiative called Smart Street, of which there's lots of information on our website, but this actually helps us reduce electricity bills for customers by controlling the voltage that they use energy at on a reactive basis all the time. We optimize the voltage that they get. That increases solar power generation and reduces carbon and reduces electricity bills. We're rolling that out for 60,000 customers. So that's what's already underway. If we move on to the next slide, we'll talk about phase two, which is the topic really for this webinar. And the challenge that we've received is to review all of our network development plans and identify where we could bring forward additional schemes that would support shovel-ready projects in the next 2 years that are aligned to the government climate change ambitions. So that's really what we're seeking to do. There are a number of principles that Ofgem have put in place to govern this scheme, and they're worth a look at. That does require us to continue to support a competitive connections market, to ensure that we're thinking about the appropriate whole system solutions and working together with other parties in the energy sector and system, and particularly other energy network operators to look for the lowest cost solutions, and we're really looking for the biggest bang for our buck and getting the most likely to proceed schemes, most deliverable schemes, and the most best value for money. So if we move on again, this is the Green Recovery Phase 2 timeline. So we launched our call for evidence on the 8th of February, and that runs until the 19th of March. And this is a timeline that is common for all DNOs, all the 14 DNOs across Great Britain. We're all running to exactly the same timetable. We will then shortlist a set of sites by the 9th of April. They go to the government. The Office of Zero Emission Vehicles is very keen on looking at this programme, and to Ofgem, who will review those for approval, and then we will be announcing the schemes that will be going forward on the 13th of May. So it's a very rapid turnaround process, because this is all about getting schemes into the ground and delivered by the really in the next 24 months. That's the time frame we're looking at. So if we move on again, the other thing that I think it's really important for us to stress up front is that we are not just looking for schemes where we need to build new network or expand our network. It may well be that the quickest way to deliver the extra capacity that's required to support low carbon technologies in particular is through engaging flexibility providers, and we will be looking to do that and considering flexibility options for all of the schemes that we're considering. So we have a broad range of requests for flexibility through our portals on our website and through the Piclo Flex portal as well. And we have recently run a call for expressions of interest on this, and we'll keep that debate going and make sure we do a flexibility review for all of the schemes. Okay, so that's a sort of background to this scheme and the size of the challenge. We'll just go into a little bit more detail on the call for evidence. So this call for evidence really ensures that stakeholders can help us shape our thinking, and that we are open to other ideas about schemes that could complement or substitute for things that are on the long list of ideas that we've already come up with in responding to this Ofgem challenge. So the potential project areas that we're most interested in include rapid charging at service stations, EV charging hubs and on-street parking, and those two areas are really focused on this response to the government's 10-point plan and the announcement that electric vehicles are to be accelerated and supported, and internal combustion engine vehicles to be phased out by 2030 at the latest. So we can see a big initiative from government to accelerate the rollout of electric vehicles, and that's why we're really looking hard at projects that support and align with that initiative. But we're also looking at other challenges under the, if we just go back one please, Amy. If we're also looking at other challenges in relation to the transition to a net zero economy. So that could include getting ready for homes and streets to become net zero, thinking about how we smarten up our network infrastructure to enable that, and also looking at economic recovery, so enterprise zones and new developments that will stimulate the economy, but really also enable us to move forward on a transition to net zero, building low carbon homes, building low carbon businesses, and supporting those kind of projects. So we have some good ideas from all of our regular contact with customers and stakeholders about things that are required, and we are looking for a wider set of ideas that we are building into our long-term business plan. We will be submitting at the end of this calendar year a business plan to Ofgem for the period from 2023 to 2028. So any schemes that don't go forward in the green recovery are very likely to go forward in the next business plan. That is the business plan that is known as Rio ED2. But we are really keen to hear from people about projects that are consistent with these Ofgem principles and will deliver the best deal, and are things that can be implemented really quickly. Not just our infrastructure being implemented quickly, but the low carbon transition things that infrastructure enables as well. So next slide, please. So with the call for evidence, we also, as well as looking for other ideas, other projects that you may have that require infrastructure support, we're also keen to get stakeholder feedback on the long list of projects. And later on in this webinar, I'll briefly introduce all of the projects on our long list that have also been posted on our website since the 8th of February. And we'll do a little poll to get some views from people on the webinar today about this long list of projects and things that are most suitable. And there's lots of ways to get in touch with us. You can fill in the online questionnaire, particularly if you have a project that you want us to consider, through our green recovery page on our website. You can talk to any of your usual contacts within Electricity North West, many of whom are on this webinar today, and you can also drop us an email if you've got any queries on anything in this, and it's easy to get in touch with us. If we move on, what we'd like to do now really is open this up. I know that's been a whistle-stop tour, but we're really keen to open this up and see what questions people may have about the Green Recovery Scheme. I'll hand back to Hannah.
Okay, so we have Renia, who's got her hand up. Renia, would you like to ask a question?
Sure, thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you for the intro, Paul. Just a quick one, in terms of the dates and the process that you guys take, how do you assess the shortlisting projects? Was the assessment criteria, in your view, in terms of what is the best way to approach our project going forward? We have certain details about what we're trying to achieve, but obviously you have to align it with Ofgem, we understand it. But what is the drive on your side? And if there are any tick boxes, please let us know in advance.
Yeah, okay, no, that's fine. So there are some clues to that in the questionnaire as well on the website. But in terms of key criteria, what we're looking at here are deliverability is a really key criteria, because this is very much about a rapid response. So it's not about necessarily which are the most important schemes to go ahead. We can take any information we receive and build that into our future business plans, but we will be shortlisting based on schemes that get enabled and can start to deliver benefits within 2 years. So it needs to be on deliverability for us. Can we do this work within the next 24 months? And readiness for implementation of the wider projects that we're supporting. So deliverability is a key criteria, and then we're also looking at the environmental benefit that is delivered, the support for the transition to the low carbon future, and value for money. So those will be the kind of key considerations that we are looking at as we go through this shortlisting. But it might be helpful if actually we publish a little bit of a bit more information on decision-making criteria, because I'm quite keen that we make this a very transparent process. So we'll undertake to do that as well.
Brilliant, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Renia. We have a question on the chat from Paul. Have you been asked to get involved in the Lancaster Balerig Garden Village, one of the 12 nationally agreed garden village projects?
Yes, I think we have. We have within the green recovery scheme actually here, and one of the other garden villages in St Cuthbert's up near Carlisle, and from what I understand, that project is closer to implementation. I don't know a lot about the Lancashire Garden Village, but I believe that is under consideration here as well. And if there's more information you can provide about that, that would be great. Really keen to see that and include that in our plans, either for this green recovery scheme or possibly for our longer term plans and infrastructure planning out to 2028.
Okay, hope that answers your question, Paul. We will cover how to do that later in the presentation. Do we have any more questions? Can't see any hands up or anything typed.
If there's nothing at this stage, that's fine. We can move on. We'll go through the long list of propositions. Oh, we've got another hand.
Sorry, yeah, it's just a follow-up question. Thank you. What is the budget? Am I right in thinking that it's only 15 million?
Yeah, so that it's not a fixed budget because we need to determine the shortlist and how that meets against the criteria that we've already talked about, and we're still having an ongoing discussion with Ofgem around. But yeah, the indicative budget that we've talked to our board about to enable this is 15 million. So there's no new funding being made available to Electricity North West by Ofgem for this programme. So this is funding that we need to find from within our existing resources, and that's having looked at what we have available and the kind of things that are on our long list. The sort of rule of thumb budget that we've started out on this is 15 million. What the final answer will be will depend on the shortlisting process.
Okay, thank you. So is this 15, and that 15 includes all the projects that you have listed out on a website, or is it 15 on top of those ones?
No, the projects that are on the website, the long list, if we were to do all of those, that would be more than 15 million. So 15 million is what we think might be required to fund a shortlist out of this long list. But the 15 million is not fixed yet. It is just an indicative number.
Brilliant. Thank you, Paul.
Okay.
So do have a couple of people typing. So Florence had just asked, are you will to review previous lapsed connection offers which companies have had to walk away from due to the connections stimulating expensive reinforcements? Might be one we
that is a good question. I think yes is the answer. What we will do in that situation, if people come back to us and say there's still something that could be ready to proceed quickly if the reinforcement was addressed, then we'll definitely look at those. What we can't do with this scheme is reinforce for a single project and just effectively cross-subsidise the reinforcement part of a connections quotation. But what we can do is look at whether there are other projects in the area, other developments that we're aware of through all of our other engagement in the area, and where there'll be a number of beneficiaries of a reinforcement, then those will be considered. So it is definitely worth coming back to us and saying that there's a project that is still viable if the reinforcement costs of the previous connection quote were addressed, and we will look at those. But what we'll need to do is to look at those within the context of a wider set of beneficiaries in that area, but we do have a lot of information about those potential kind of things. So, yep, we are keen to hear from those who weren't able to take forward previous projects because the reinforcement costs were prohibitive.
So Florence has just added, thank you. Is there a way to apply for multiple sites at once? Is there a follow-up question?
If those sites are all in a similar geographic area, then they may all benefit from a single reinforcement scheme, and therefore they could be grouped together as one application in our questionnaire on the website. If actually they're dispersed in terms of their geographic location, then we need to look at what the network requirements are for each scheme individually. So it's more helpful to us to evaluate those if they're put in separately. So grouping of schemes is fine, but grouping really needs to be on the basis of geographic proximity so that they can all be supported by the same parts of our existing electricity network, and we can look at where the reinforcement of that network may support that group of schemes.
Okay. Hopefully that's answered your question.
Yep.
Yep. Excellent. Okay.
Okay, great stuff. So if there are no further questions, shall we move on to the long list?
Yep.
Okay. So what I'm going to do, again, there's a bit more information here. It's very similar to the information that's already on the website, to be honest with you. But what I've done is grouped these projects together so that you can see the kind of things that we are considering and how they strongly align with the discussions that we've had with Ofgem and with government about support for the transition to net zero, and how they are issues that we've reviewed in our network development plans in light of the government's advancing policy and the very recent announcements on the 10-point plan. So the two big areas really that we've considered and that come up in what we've done are under electric vehicles and net zero ready homes and streets. And the homes and streets stuff, some of it supports net zero technology adoption by domestic customers, and some of it supports economic regeneration and businesses that are transitioning to net zero, or the growth in low carbon technologies. So we'll go through the EV ones first. So we've got 3 schemes up front that are areas of network that need reinforcement for a number of reasons, but have within them a motorway service area where there is interest in EV charging infrastructure being fitted. So again, these are good examples of this idea of multiple benefits, multiple beneficiaries from reinforcement in certain strategic areas. So the first one is in the North Carlisle area, around the Todd Hills motorway services. If we move on to the second one, is at Lancaster Forton. Same idea here. Number of bits of development potentially going on around that area, but very little infrastructure in place at the moment. One thing to just note on this one is that one of the things that we're considering here is some future proofing. So the potential requirement at the moment would probably be satisfied by an 11,000 volt circuit to give it about 2.5 megawatts. But what we may consider there is actually building this with a 33 kV circuit, so that that's effectively future proofed, and if there's further growth, then there won't be the need to to dig again, we'll just be able to change the plant switchgear at the end of that cable and uprate that very quickly, and move on to the third of the EV motorway service area ones, and this is around Birch, very similar to the other two schemes, and there you can see is, there's also development going on potentially at the Birch Business Park that would benefit from reinforcement in this area. So those are those first three. If we can move on to the next slide, the other thing that we are looking at in relation to EV charging and on-street charging in particular is to put in place a rapid release fund that will enable schemes that come forward on our 11 kV and 6.6 kV network, where a charging hub might be developed on a major A road or in a public location, and this benefits a wide range of customers who might be interested in adopting electric vehicles but don't have their own off-street parking, and so these charging hubs are a key enabler to the development of low carbon vehicles. There's a number of different discussions that are going on about the development of those. Some of that is taking place with the local authorities who operate across our region, and this rapid release fund would enable us to have the wherewithal to respond very quickly to them on those schemes and ideas. If we move on to the next slide, then if we start thinking about the net zero ready homes and streets, the first proposal here is for a technology that really we have been considering for our Rio ED2 business plan, but could now accelerate and deliver in the next 2 years. And this covers all of the Northwest, and it is about fitting low voltage network monitoring devices on our ground mounted substations that give us much better understanding of the usage of the network, and in doing that it allows us to flex how we operate the network, and we can release about 20% additional capacity. So our proposal here is that we fit those right across the region at 5,000 of our ground mounted substations that are the ones that serve the highest densities of customers, and we think with doing that we could actually get coverage to about 1 million customer connection points, that's homes and businesses, and this would be a very quick and cheap way to enable a lot more capacity to be developed and released as we see low carbon technologies come onto the network. So that's quite an exciting proposition for us, and covers the whole region. If we move on then to a number of schemes that are more location specific. The first is about discussions that we're having with Greater Manchester Combined Authority on enabling electric heat, and this would be a programme of reinforcing our low voltage network and unlooping the individual services that go up to properties to enable low carbon technologies to be connected across a wide range of locations within Greater Manchester. We move on to the next one, and then that we've now got a series of developments. So somebody mentioned Garden Village programme. St Cuthbert's Garden Village Carlisle is another one on that programme, and is ready to start work, I think, within the next 12 months. So this would be the reinforcement and future proofing of the network to support that development for new homes and new businesses and community facilities all around the south of Carlisle. Next one, please. is the Godley Green Garden Village. Here, this is a bit of a smaller scheme initially, which provides some preparation work to monitor network usage and understand how we do connection of low carbon technologies. Moving on, then another Manchester one, and quite a few of these are, but it is where about half of our entire customer base live is in Greater Manchester, so not a surprise that we've got quite a few schemes that come out here. So in the Mayfield area of the city, around the university's North Campus and the Piccadilly station, there's a potential need for reinforcing the network there to enable a number of different schemes that are potentially being considered. Move on to the next one. This is the River ENWL frontage, and in the sort of Deansgate, Blackfriars area of Manchester, and one that we think is particularly suitable for being addressed with flexibility solution. Keep going. I think we've got the last one coming up, which is the Central Manchester Southern Gateway. And again, there's a lot of discussion about a number of developments around the Manchester Science Park and the Oxford Road corridor for low carbon developments in that region, both low carbon buildings, supporting also low carbon research and technology, which are an economic growth stimulus, but also that there's a wide adoption of low carbon technologies going on in that area as well, particularly heat pumps and PV photovoltaics. So I think that's the last one. Again, I've gone very quickly through that list. There is all of this information will be available. It's already available on our website. This set of slides will be available for people to review at their leisure after this session as well. But I'm going to hand back now to Hannah, and we can have a look at whether there are any extra questions that have been raised, and then do a little bit of polling.
Yep, thank you, Paul. So I've put in the chat a link to a poll, and essentially it's the 11 projects that Paul's just described. And we're asking you to identify your top 3 projects that you would wish for us to go ahead with. If you could click on that link and fill that poll in, you should be able to see the results as other people do their votes as well, but we will come back to it at the end of the webinar to give you an overview of what people's general responses are. Whilst people are filling that poll out, Paul is happy to answer any questions if you wanted to go back on any of those projects.
Hannah, can I just ask a question? What is the poll being used for in this instance? Should people want to go away, read up more about the individual projects, and then make the vote? Is this going to actually be used? So
the poll will be open for after the webinar. So if people did want to do a bit more investigations before they provided us the feedback, they can do. What we're trying to do is get a feel from stakeholders in terms of which ones are important and which ones have the support, not just the ones that we necessarily think we should be progressing with. So we're trying to get that feedback from stakeholders.
Yeah, and Martin, I think it's important probably to say that the poll is not going to be definitive on this, but we thought it would be interesting for people to compare their notes and initial reactions to this. It'll add to our evidence base, but it is not a key determinant of what goes into the shortlist. That will be determined by a more extensive evaluation process that we're currently designing jointly with Ofgem and all of the other members of the Energy Networks Association.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
Hopefully it's been fun as well.
Any questions? We did have a comment on the Lancaster supporting the 33 kV future proofing.
Yeah, I saw that from Paul. That's exactly what we were thinking. That there's a number of things that are in consideration in potential development. They might not all come forward in the next 24 months, but longer term, we think there'll be quite a lot of development in that around that area, and thinking forward and doing some future proofing is a sensible way to go. The potential for charging at the services themselves as well is likely to continue to increase, and the long-term projections for EV charging are that those could be quite extensive power requirements if people wanted to deploy the sort of super rapid chargers as well. So future proofing for that is also important. If there are no more questions at this stage, we'll move on, I guess, with the some extra information. So a little bit of information about how the long list was derived. We have reviewed, and there was a question about this earlier, we have reviewed connection applications that haven't proceeded, and those have helped inform us of where tactical interventions on the network would be things that would be sensible. So where we've known before that it's been costly for individual customers to make connections because there was a big network reinforcement charge included in previous applications, that information has been utilised in our work. We are looking at sort of maximum benefit on a value for money basis. As I said earlier, that's always going to be a key consideration. The costs that we incur to undertake this network development all find their way into the bills of our customers across the Northwest. It all comes through their energy bills, and we do recognise that in the Northwest we have one of the highest populations of customers who are in fuel poverty, and so it's a very serious consideration for us to put additional burdens on customers' bills. So we are always looking for maximum value for money, and we're always challenged to do that by Ofgem as well, which is quite right. And the schemes that we've put onto the long list do look to make the most of the existing network, and then think about what are the subsequent interventions that are coming along, what's the future proofing requirements, what do we think are the least regrets investments to make now, because we can see into the future a large bow wave of decarbonisation activity coming along in those areas. So the long-term view and the long-term focus has been an important driver, but then within the selection of things to put into the long list, the initial triage has been looking at what do we think is going to happen most quickly, so where is it least regrets to make these investments. If we move on to the next slide, we've already answered some questions about the selection criteria, but as I've said before, it is about least regrets type schemes. It is very important for us to focus on deliverability, because this is about not only us spending money in the next 2 years, but also enabling projects So getting leverage off our expenditure into a wider set of projects that will also get shovels in the ground, start to be delivered in the next 2 years, because that is linking back to the COVID response element of this recovery scheme to stimulate the economic recovery that's required to build our way back out of the effects of the COVID-19 lockdowns and best value for money, as I was saying before. Local support, though, is really important for projects, and Ofgem have asked us to have a particular focus on projects that might be developed by community energy groups and can demonstrate a level of local support that will strengthen applications. Offers of co-investment or in-kind contributions could also be considered, such as land or cable routes to enable things to happen. So it doesn't necessarily need to be a financial contribution, but just providing access over land to enable us to put our equipment in place is a very easy way for a significant contribution to be made that can improve the attractiveness of a project. And the other thing that has been flagged by the national scheme is that weight will be given to developments that are part of local area energy plans, and I know that across our region there is work underway by the local authorities to develop local area energy plans. There is a transport and infrastructure planning going on in Cumbria. There is a local development planning and regional regeneration decarbonisation planning going on for Lancashire, and there are local area energy plans underway in Manchester, in Bury, Salford and the Manchester City centre region already, and longer term local area energy plans will be developed for all 10 boroughs in Greater Manchester Combined Authority area. So a lot of work going on right across our region in this kind of area, which we are trying to ensure that we remain very strongly aligned with. Move on to the next one. So one of the things that has already come up a little bit, and it's really important to emphasise, is the costs that the Green Recovery Scheme can cover and can't cover. So the funding is available to invest in the electricity network itself. So we can't cover things like the cost of EV chargers themselves, but the infrastructure to provide the capacity for those chargers we can cover. Just as an example, the reinforcement is targeted in areas where there's significant activity and an increase in low carbon technologies being adopted, which is driving up demand, where that might be electric vehicles or heat pumps or other ways of decarbonising heating, or it might be in areas where renewable generation is coming. So if these schemes do go ahead, they can reduce the cost of connection for those projects. And that's why I said earlier, it's really important that if previous connection projects have been stalled by the reinforcement costs, they may well be reconsidered as part of a wider development. But the fund is aiming at new projects that are struggling to be justified due to those network infrastructure costs, but it can't cover cost of third-party projects and equipment, and it can't cover sole use connection assets. So that would be parts of the network that are only in place to serve a single customer. Those are chargeable to that customer, and Ofgem's principles that I talked about right at the start have been very clear that they can't change the rules on what is covered and costed and chargeable. But if there is more network in place and it's nearer to a connecting party, then the sole use assets that are required go down, and that makes the whole project cheaper. So hopefully that covers those things. What we are very aware of, just to sort of close really on information provision, is this quote from Jonathan Brearley, who's the Chief Executive of Ofgem, when he was talking about the Green Recovery Scheme on its launch in a blog that he put on the Ofgem website. So with the clock ticking on the UK's race to hit net zero emissions, we really can't afford to delay, and that's why deliverability and getting projects into the ground in the next 2 years is one of the key considerations in this particular scheme. But what I also want to just reinforce to everybody is that we are developing a very comprehensive business plan to take us from 2023 to 2028, and information that we glean through this process that doesn't make it into the shortlist will be utilised in the structuring of that business plan, so that we can make sure we are supporting all the schemes that are coming forward in the Northwest, and enabling all of our stakeholders to play their part in the transition to a net zero economy. So that was all I wanted to go to set out and say. We'll touch on some next steps in a minute, but I'll hand back to Hannah for a final Q&A.
Thanks, Paul. So whilst you're thinking of any questions, I haven't seen any hands up or anything in the chat. I'll just give you a summary on the survey that we've sent out. You should all be able to see the results on your screen, and I will send it over to Amy so we can put it on the screen. But currently we've got Lancaster, Forton area strategic reinforcement, and the Greater Manchester electric heating enabler as being selected sort of top. The network reinforcement for EV charging hubs and on-street parking is getting good support, and the Presense LV network monitoring is also getting a few votes. So
that's good, interesting. Thank you for that. That's interesting to see what's top, and it's good that there's a spread of specific locations, both in Manchester and in Lancashire, and then some schemes that are addressing customers right across the region, from the Scottish borders down to Buxton. That's just pretty much the patch we cover. So
I'm still not seeing any questions.
Okay, that's good. Is there anything else you want to ask, Hannah?
So yes, there's questions.
One question just coming in, hand up.
Renia?
Hi, yes, thank you. Thank you for the presentation, really useful. I was wondering if, as a potential customer, if we were able to have someone getting in touch with us so we could discuss Cheshire East projects and the ambition for the council, and also the projects that we have in the pipeline, because I think they are very much well aligned with the priorities set by Ofgem. Unfortunately, they were not on the list, so I withhold my rights to vote because I couldn't see our projects for that reason. Just a little bit greedy, if you like to say. But yeah, if we could have a follow-up, please, because we're in the process of collating the information to submit the expression of interest, but obviously a little bit more detailed discussion would be very helpful.
Yep, we can certainly do that, Renia, and I've got a great team supporting me on this webinar today, and we'll capture your contact details, and then we'll follow up on that. We'd be very happy to do so.
Brilliant, thank you.
And I do have some questions coming in now. We've got one which says, I already have a connections quote. Will I get a cheaper quote if one of those projects goes ahead?
So unfortunately, the answer to that is no. So as I said earlier, one of the Ofgem principles is that we're not allowed to cross-subsidise individual connection quotations. However, if you have a connection quote that has lapsed or has decided that it was not economically viable and didn't go ahead, then raising that back with us to say if there were lower reinforcement costs, this one might be resubmitted, then that's important to do so, because if there are, as I said, if there are a number of schemes in a close geographic area where a reinforcement would serve multiple connecting customers and give multiple benefits, then those are the kind of things that will be considered. As you've seen from some of the examples that we've given on the long list, some of those areas in the central Manchester, there are multiple potential connectees in there and multiple beneficiaries, and that's where, you know, our network needs to be larger.
And we have something else coming through. Will I get a refund for any reinforcement works on my particular job?
Again, no, it's not about addressing individual connection quotations, but it may be about enabling new applications to be made. Okay.
And got one more.
Okay.
How will ENWL and Ofgem decide which projects go ahead?
Okay, so yeah, it's probably worth me reiterating. So the decision-making process is two stages. So ENWL will use our criteria to select a short list of projects from the long list that we've already published and the new proposals and projects that are submitted to us. And that will be on the basis of best value for money, deliverability, and least regrets in alignment with the net zero ambitions. So we will do that process ourselves, and then we will submit that shortlist to Ofgem. Ofgem have said to us they will review the shortlist very quickly, and provided that that shortlist has been compiled in line with a set of criteria as I've sort of set out already, and we're continuing to explore with them, then they will come straight back and say, having confirmed that, they will approve the shortlist in its entirety. So Ofgem are not going to pick from our shortlist. They are likely to say if the process has been followed, then they will give a yes to all of it, and then that is what will go forward. So the decision-making process is largely the shortlisting process and then an Ofgem approval for that entire shortlist. And that's how the scheme will work, and then hopefully come May we'll be able to announce what schemes are going forward.
Okay. I think
so if that's the last one, we'll move on to the next steps just to finish off. So as we said before, this call for evidence is open until the 19th of March, and there's multiple ways to get in touch with us: the questionnaire, bilateral discussions, or email to our stakeholder engagement mailbox. And then the shortlisting will be submitted to Ofgem by the 12th of April and decisions announced in May. So just remains for me to sort of say thanks very much to everybody for listening, and thanks for a great set of questions.